40 degrees outside. He's got his AC.
Yeah.
Hanging parked outside his office.
All right, we're live, folks.
To call the meeting to order this evening. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item is our consent agenda. The recommended action is to approve the items below, which are included in the consent agenda. 6A minutes, 8A athletic mergers, 8B AD reduction, 8C board member conference approval, 8D resolution for the disposal of personal property, and 8E special education. Any discussion on this at all? Anyone? Somebody want to make a motion? Anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion.
I'll second it. Please vote. Yeah, 5 yes. Okay. For the good of the cause. Karen, do we have anybody that's emailed or? Nope, no emails. Okay, doesn't appear like anyone is here. Information for the public. There's a couple of items there that were brought up at a previous meeting in Wilmington regarding the busing of after-school athletes and also how the bicycles were distributed from the Ironman. So the explanation is both there. So again, those questions were brought up, and we typically make sure that we come back with a concerted effort to answer the questions previously. So the answers are there.
And will those visitors to the meeting find those answers?
I already emailed this.
Oh, yeah, I several times just been so impressed with people. Make that effort.
They're all done.
You know, it's wonderful.
Quick.
Yeah.
Once I got out of
I'm
better.
there.
That's really good.
You know, it's wonderful that they come, and we typically don't engage in conversation back and forth at the time because it gives the board the opportunity to just digest what's being asked of us and to make sure that we're giving an accurate response. So typically at the next meeting, or Tim prior to was in contact with those people that had those concerns.
It is hard to not say anything.
It's difficult.
Yeah, it's really.
Well, I found myself after that meeting just saying, thank you very much. Without tipping the hand one way or the other.
No,
just
no.
Making sure that they know.
Yeah, that we care about what their concerns are, but without us speaking out of turn, to take the time to discern and be respectful. We have a presentation, civics overview. I think that Tim will give us a brief description of where we're at right now with our civics.
Yes, so just to contextualize where we are, so as the board knows, the promotion of civics and civic engagement amongst our students is a major priority of the school district. And so this is going to be a multi-part conversation that we'll have. So this is the first of 3 sort of discussions that I'll have with the board, just about where we are and where we could go. So really the baseline for all of this, the first part, which I'll talk about tonight, talks specifically about how civics is engaged in the classroom setting. So I'm just going to talk about K-12. And thankfully, that's my jam because I was a social studies teacher, so no problem there. So participation in government teacher for my entirety of my teaching career. We'll look at the standards, and then we'll look at some of the ways that we're implementing this in our grade levels, particularly at the elementary level. There's some cool things we're doing that are nuanced. The next 2 times I talk, the next one we'll be talking about all the outside things we do to promote civics: field trips, voter registration efforts, student government, projects, and volunteering. And then the final will be looking at the Seal of Civic Readiness, which is an accreditation that a graduating senior can earn on their diploma. And that is a new initiative from New York State. And so I'll talk about that in the coming months as well. But let's get down to basics here. So part one, New York State framework, standards, and grade level implementation. Okay, so I tried to highlight here, I'll warn you, these documents are prodigious. There's a lot of pages. So let's focus first on the social studies framework, okay? So the social studies framework is kind of like, if you're a social studies teacher, it gives you the content you should cover, the sorts of questions and skills you should ask students, and the standards you should try and hit, all right? So it also helps prepare students for college, careers, and civic life. So if you just gave a social studies teacher the framework by grade level, they could effectively know what they need to teach. The standards are the 5 standards that are basically threaded throughout the framework. And so every social studies lesson will hit one of these lessons, either one of these standards, the history of New York or the US, world history, geography, economics, and note the 5th one, civics, citizenship, and government. So standard 5 is the one we really want to pay attention to in depth. So standard 5, civics, citizenship, and government says students will use a variety of intellectual skills to demonstrate their understanding of the necessity for governments, the systems of governments in the US and other nations, the US Constitution, civic values of democracy, the roles, rights, and responsibilities of citizens, and avenues of participation. So the way that most standards and curriculum in New York State works is it's called a spiral curriculum. All right, and so at the earliest level, students will be introduced to a concept at a basic level, and then usually within 1 or 2 years, they'll be introduced to the next level of that same concept, and then another year or 2, and so it keeps spiraling over it. And that's all based on the notion of how our brains are wired to learn, that you basically, you have information in your brain, you recall that information, and then you layer new information into that, and that the way your brain categorizes memory is one of the ways that you're able to retain new information. So we've all, I'm sure, experienced things where you've crammed for something and then lost it, like it's like that was useless knowledge. So the way that this is set up is intended to repeat and weave these things together so that you actually recall the information. So in the standard of standard 5, the civic standards, there are 4 substandards, okay? I'm not going to show you all of those, but I'm just showing you one so you can see how it progresses at an elementary, middle, and high school level. So the first one talks about, it's all the same standard, the study of civics, citizenship, and government involves learning about systems, purpose of governments, etc. And then it very specifically says, you know, by grade 5, students need to know the meaning of democracy, citizenship, etc. Explain the consequences of what happens if you don't have a government, which is always a fun lesson to teach. And then other ones here discuss how and why the world is divided into nations. That's basic level. Then you can see, analyze how the values of a nation affect the different rights that people are afforded. And then the commencement is, analyze how the values of a nation and international organizations affect the guarantee of human rights and make provisions for human needs. So you can just start to see it gets more and more progressively complicated. But it's all necessary, obviously, because if you're not an informed citizen, then participation is sort of a moot point. So let's talk about the actual content itself. So if you look at the framework, it breaks it down from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. So, and basically it kind of branches outward. So you start with self and others in kindergarten. Grade 1 is my family and other families, now and long ago. Grade 2, my community and other US communities, communities around the world for 3. I sound like Alex Trebek, I apologize. Grade 4, local history and local government, Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere. And then you start to see that in grade 7, it's almost like a repetition, once again, of a lot of those same content areas, but more more specific. So I was a 7th and 8th grade history teacher, which covers the entirety of basically the history of the Americas, the United States, and New York. And then 9 and 10, those of you with 9th and 10th graders or who have had them, you will note that this is often the demise of the social studies student. The global history curriculum is truly a beast.
Yeah.
They revised it recently, so now the 10th grade Regents exam is only based on content taught in 10th grade, not 9th and 10th grade. So they recognize that, students with a developing prefrontal cortex may not remember Ibn Battuta's trade routes 2 years ago. Grade 11, US history and government, and then grade 12, participation in government, economics, etc. So grade 12, it splits in half. You have half a semester of economics and half a semester of participation in government. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay, so then what does this mean for us? So this is a copy of a part of our elementary schedule, K through 6. And basically what you want to look for are all the circles. Anywhere that I've circled indicates by grade level what time is embedded to cover either direct social studies or science, which at the higher levels, they balance each other out. So science and social studies every other day. And that's an hour block for that. And then some of the grade levels you'll note, like in K, there is no science and social studies at all, right? And that's just because we do a two-pronged effort. So we have standalone social studies units, and then we have our new Amplify curriculum, which is the science of reading. So CKLA is a part. It's I wrote this acronym down because it's still new to me, but
It's,
core knowledge, language arts, I believe, something to that effect. And then they have continuations of that. But basically, in our new science of reading curriculum, which everyone is using, the units are designed to be very vocabulary driven, and there's a lot of nonfiction in there. So the way that we sneak in additional social studies and science beyond the standalone blocks is through this curriculum. So this indicates all of the different unit choices that can be embedded for us. So all of the orange in grade K, these are the different units that specifically are for like literature and language arts, and they spread across science and then social studies. And some of the things you'll see is you'll see connections between these, and this is that weaving of concepts that get progressively more challenging over time. So our social studies and science units, as I said, are embedded in the CKLA common language. So just like historically, social studies and science have always gotten short shrift in the elementary classroom. Math and English drive instruction. And then kids get to 6th grade and, you want to have a conversation about government, and it's like, one of the rare times that those conversations have happened. So it's beneficial that our new program embeds this across the board. Okay, another thing that we've done this year is our school librarian, Kat Haney, who's fantastic, she identified all of these additional reinforcement texts that can be used. They're called trade books that align with our Amplify curriculum. And so if we're doing a unit on, the origins of America, then in the library, she will have, you see American Indians and African Americans of the American Revolution. She'll have that book out on the shelf, and during the 6-day rotation she has with students, she may read those, or she may direct students to pay particular attention to those because she knows where the different grade levels are with their curriculum. So it's really great. All sides of the house are talking to each other with regards to this. So those 209 books are available. We also got several English language learner books that align with this too, which is great. Because since I've last spoken with you, we have 3 new English language learning students in the district. So current number is 21. Okay, so let's go to the high school then. So at the middle high school level, there are Regents exams, which are a requirement for a Regents diploma to graduate. Basically, in New York State, you have to pass at a minimum 1 Regents exam in social studies. Theoretically, you could pass 2, and it would count as an additional exam towards graduation. It's kind of like, it's called the 4+1 framework. So to graduate with a Regents diploma, you have to pass one Regents in science, math, English, and social studies, and then the +1 is the one of your choosing based on how you perform. So the big ones for performance are global history and geography, 10th grade, and US history and government in 11th. That's our region schedule for the year. There's the 4+1 framework I referenced. And then an additional piece is you also have to take the specific courses, US history, global for 2 years, and then the half credit of participation in government, half credit of economics. So those are the required credits you have to have in order to obtain your graduation diploma. So okay, that's kind of it. So you can see why I broke this up into 3 phases.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of information. But the part that I want you to leave with an appreciation for, I think I'm most pleased with this. This is really neat. It's a rarity. And this back and forth with our library, and I really am liking seeing all that alignment. And so I do think it will reinforce student vocabulary, which is the biggest driver, I think, for increased proficiency in English language arts. But also, I think it will lead to our students being much more informed about science and social studies. So, when I get to the second phase in maybe another month or 2, I will be sure to do a cursory review of this because I know Ron and John, 2 of our big civic stalwarts, are not present for tonight. Nonetheless, that's phase 1.
It's really nice to have seen the visual of the daily schedule at the elementary level, where you can see throughout the day or week where you're hitting these milestones. So it's great.
Awesome. Any questions?
Alrighty, I'm going to move on to the report section and treasurer's report with Dana, please.
Sure, you can see for the end of September, flush with cash.
Yay.
Yeah, that time of year. This is that time of year where our cash receipts far exceed our cash disbursements. And that's just because of all of our property taxes. You can see that we brought in a little under $13 million. Well, all said, over 3, it's a little over $13 million, but only had cash disbursement of about $1.5 million. So, and that is typical for this time of year as we collect our property taxes. And you can see that as a result of all of those property taxes coming in, we do shift that money. Most of it's over into our NICLAS. And you can see on the other side column, we currently have, in NICLAS in various accounts, a little over $19 million. Some of that is tied to, not all $19 million in NICLAS. It's $19 million between NICLAS and our operating accounts. NICLAS itself has about $14 million. And that's where we're generating our greatest rate of return is in those. And that is where we're putting it at this point. And throughout the year, as we draw down and we continue paying our bills, we pull out of the NICLAS and put it in the operating accounts. So that's most of our money stays in the higher interest bearing accounts. And we only put enough money in our operating account to pay our bills, our payroll and our warrants to maximize our rate of return. You can see, because as a result of doing that, just for the month of September, we generated a little over $42,000 just in interest in 1 month. So that's the one thing good about the way the current rates are in terms of we're still sitting at about 5%. The Federal Reserve system lowering the key rates, which will then lower interest rates and things like that. So we're still sitting at high 4s, 5%. So this is the time that we put it in there so that we can generate the most we can have. So all said and done, we are in a very similar position as we typically are for the end of September over the last few years. Questions on the treasury report? more money in than coming out.
Okay, moving on to budget performance report.
Yeah, so you'll see the graph I shared with you. I did this actually up until October 10th, so just last week. I tried to make it as close to up to date as possible, not just at the end of the month. And you can see that when you look at it, these are our major categories. Basically, for salaries, we're talking about a $7,000 difference between this year and last year. And when you look across there, we have actually a couple negatives. Contractual and BOCES, we're down about $91,000 from last year. And materials and supplies, it's about $24,000 reduction. And a lot of this is truly just about timing in terms of that, when we pay things. BOCES is a big driver on that. We hadn't actually, by this point, we hadn't actually even paid our September invoice, so that would change it. But I'll say, if you look at it from as of October 10th, it's about a $200,000 difference from last year, a little over 2% increase in expenditures from last year to this year, which that's typical. I mean, our budget increase was about 3%. So, we're about on par with where we budgeted as an increase from last year. So things are looking good in terms of the expense side.
Any questions for Dana?
For that, for appropriations for revenue
Oh, sorry.
in itself, that's all right. Revenue, you can see there isn't a lot of difference from last year, from last month to this month. We have our property taxes, in terms of what we've collected. Everything else is still pretty flat because this time of year is most of our revenue is coming in from property taxes. When I looked at just prior to the meeting, we actually have collected a little over about $16.5 million in our property taxes. So we're about $1 million shy of what our tax levy is. But that's typical. Last year we were about the same amount, so that's not unusual. Taxpayers have until the end of this month to pay to us directly with just a 2% penalty at this point for the month of October. Come November 1st, it becomes 3%, but then all of the remaining unpaid balances we send to the county, and then the county re-levies it and basically submits bills for the taxpayers that haven't paid the property taxes. It gets re-levied through the county with penalties, and in the end, whatever we have not received, we do get from the county by April. So that's why we always know that our property tax amount is going to come in because of the process that's put in place. Because the county does then go after it, collect it, process there. So we are again looking at a very similar as to last year in terms of where we are for revenue. Not a lot of state revenues come in or federal. That doesn't really start to happen until the first of the year. So.
Dana, do we have anybody under that category of the pilot this year?
Yes, we actually have two. So we've had the $4,000 one, which I believe is the Commons building, and then we picked one up last year. I want to say it's the new apartment structure down here, and that's
The other one?
I believe so.
Yeah, the other one?
Yes.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
So basically, rather than that property getting levied an assessment and they pay based off their assessments, they negotiate with the town and the village to have a set price. So this is with the town, and I believe it's a pilot of about $12,000. So we're collecting a little over $16,000 now in pilots. And with that new property, there's actually a built-in escalator every year. It increases. I think all said between all the municipalities, the pilot is about $25,000. We get about $12,000 of that, and then it increases, I think, like 3% a year for the next. I forget how long the pilot is for. A long time. Questions on the budget performance?
Operations report?
Yes, I asked Tim to add this. Normally, it's the first meeting of the month, but I did want to talk about some things where looking at some purchases and using the repair reserve as a means to purchase these things. And one of the things that we can do with repair reserve, remember about a year ago, you guys we talked about it for the fitness center in the auditorium, and we held a public hearing to use that expenses. And that is one mechanism. The other mechanism is we can go ahead and utilize those funds purchases. And as long as we pay back, bless you, we pay back what we expense within 2 years, we don't have to go through the public hearing process. But, you know, felt that it was prudent to talk about it at this meeting so that it is still public, so the public does know that, you know, what we are looking to spend this money on. And what we're looking at is we're upgrading our entire phone system. It's been like a 2-year process. It's finally coming to fruition, looking at installation at the end of December, and that's going to cost about $134,000 to literally replace our entire phone system. We had talked about, and it actually appeared on a building condition survey, replacing the generator here at the middle high school. That's kind of its last legs. So we're looking at spending about $75,000 to put in a new generator, a new Polar generator here. So that's we can check that off our BCS. One other, another item that is a consideration, and we haven't necessarily agreed upon it in terms of doing it, but I figured it was prudent just to bring it up, is looking at spending about $78,000 on some additional security measures, i.e. looking at the door contact sensors. We've looked at this a few different times over the last few years. We added part of the COPS grants, the grant that we did not get. But this is something that we'll have further discussions on, about spending $78,000 to put those contacts on all exterior doors so that if the doors remain ajar for 30 seconds, 40 a minute, the notification is sent to whoever we designate, letting them know that door 3 is open, as well as tying that into some additional strobes and stuff like that. So I actually have Linstar coming on site Thursday to kind of do a walkthrough, so we can get some additional information on that. So that is a possibility in terms of if we want to go down that road of adding these door contact sensors to both buildings, all the buildings, in fact, to expend $78,000. And then the last thing, which isn't going to come out of repair reserves, as we've talked about, we've struggled this fall with transportation a little bit, which we've been fortunate enough over the last few years to not have that issue. And for whatever reason, the bug has hit this district this year in terms of providing that adequate transportation. A year ago, we purchased the 9-seater so that we could have non-bus drivers transport students, provided that there was only, that bus only holds, I think, seven kids plus a driver. Use it as an occasional driver, so you don't need a school bus driver license to do that. But looking at getting a 15-passenger transit passenger van, because that's the max. Max according to the state is 14 students plus a driver without having a school bus license. So we're looking at potentially purchasing that van during this school year and not waiting until the end of it and putting it out on a proposition and running it through our general fund. That's going to be about $68,000. But we truly are finding that there's a need to have that additional small transportation vehicle so that if we need a coach to drive some students, it's a bigger capacity than the 7, but obviously does not exceed what the state mandates in terms of no more than 14 being transported without a bus driver. So, but I wanted to bring that out. So these are all the things that we're kind of looking at. So a lot of it's we're going to use the repair reserve, and the van itself, if we go down that road, will come out of the general fund.
Is the difficulty having enough vehicles or having enough drivers?
Drivers. So to kind of give us more flexibility, a year ago, we purchased the white van, which is like a 9-seater. Because at the time, that was really what was available, just coming out of COVID and finding vehicles of that size. So we did that, and it's worked great. But we're finding that we're struggling a little even more. So looking at that next step up of getting a 15-passenger to be able to transport, twice as many and still be under the legal limit of no more than 15 in the vehicle. And it is actually going with the passenger van versus a 14-passenger bus, like a bigger version of the white one we have. Just think about the Northwood white vans that you see driving around, those are probably a 15-passenger. So we could, go down that road as well, but that kind of vehicle is actually about just under $30,000 more to go that route versus a transit van, which same capacity, but it also will be all-wheel drive, which is a nice safety feature versus the white buses, the rear wheel drive. So I think we had great flexibility. Nikki Corson, our transportation person, supervisor, as well as Pat, our mechanic, has looked at the specs, and they say, yeah, this is exactly what we are in need of. So I'm going to bring that to your attentions.
And interestingly, as we discussed today, Dana, were the electric mandate to continue in the future, these sorts of occasional vehicles are exempt from electrification.
Right.
So
That's a good thing.
Yeah, these are considered technically school buses, so we couldn't use these to do daily stops to take kids up. They're not yellow. In order for if the school bus, they have to be yellow by law, but those are the ones that you are stopping, multiple stops to pick up and drop off kids. And that's not what these vehicles would be used for.
Thank you, Dana.
Yep.
Any other questions for Dana? Can we move on? Okay, we'll move on to Tim and the superintendent's report, please.
okay, lots of activity the last several weeks. The weather was good, and so people took advantage. So I'll start just at the middle high school. There was an astronomy night hosted by Mr. Baker and Mr. Brunner at John Brown Farm, which was pretty neat. And they cooked s'mores with the kids and showed them the constellations. So that was great, and I appreciate them doing that of their own volition. The 8th graders traveled to the Historical Society. This is something that they do every year, both to familiarize the students with their local history, but also in preparation for learning like the finer museum etiquette that will be necessary when they go to the Smithsonian Museums in DC in March. So that was very well planned by the 8th grade team, and the students did a nice job there. Last week, the 6th grade team made their sojourn to Mount Van Hoverberg. This is something they've done for several years, and obviously the highlight for the kids is the mountain coaster ride that they all get to do. So the weather was just right for it, which is great. And Ms. Kakufka took a dozen students to Peru, New York for a museum workshop, or excuse me, a music workshop to hone in on their chops a little more, which is great. One of the things that you would have seen in our middle high school, particularly over the past several weeks, is just the sheer magnitude of political posters in the hallways. This was not a Harris Waltz Trump ban situation. This was the heated student council and class elections. So by all accounts, from staff and students, this was the most robust election cycle we've had in many years. The mere presence of posters was a welcome advertisement that they were literally covering the school with them. But all positions were filled, and all told, it was a really positive election cycle for the kids. So I think that is a nice trend. One of the cool things that also transpired since our last meeting is we held our book club day at the middle high school. This is a really neat event that is planned in part with the Educational Opportunity Fund, but really spearheaded by Laurel Reese at the middle high school and Caitlin Patno. And so Book Club Day is the culmination of 6 weeks or 6 months of planning. Towards the tail end of the school year last year, students were given an array of books to select. And whatever they selected, the Ed Op Fund paid for the books and gave them to the kids over the summer. And then over the summer, they had the opportunity to read the book, or leading up to this, to either read the book, cram, or leverage whatever tools they possibly could for a book day. But then they held a half-day book club. And so all of the students were split up amongst their peers based on the books they chose, and each faculty member led a book club. So I got to go into 3 or 4 different ones. It was super fun. I went to Laurel's room. She had, like cider and donuts out for the kids. And she's like, if we're going to be a book club, then we got to get the vibe right. So it was lovely. I walked next door to Mr. Bosworth's room, and his book, her book was about students surviving, kind of like the Lord of the Flies modern sort of situation, how they survived in this situation. And then Mr. Bosworth's book was apparently just about straight horror or something. So, there was a murder, and it got real dark real quick. So I don't know, but it was fun, and that was great. So I popped into several classrooms, but it's great to see kids just engaged talking about books. And I got to see the books that were ears. I saw the ones that were dog-eared, and I saw the ones that looked brand new. And I didn't give anyone the hairy eyeball. I just said this is all part of it. So, so that was really cool. So I applaud everyone for their effort there. I think it was just a wonderful event.
Wonderful.
At the elementary school, lots of things happening as well. We had the Walk, Ride, and Roll school day hosted by community schools in the Lake Placid Police Department, supported by the fire department and the electric department. So we had over 50 students walk, bike, or roll from the train museum all the way to school, and they were part of a parade. It was Grace, you were there. It was a brisk morning, but it was great to see them there, and thank you for your coverage of that. That was a nice event. And thanks to Amanda Cassidy for being the originator of that idea. Amanda is a longtime sub in our district, and talk about agency. She took that on, herself as a sub of our district. So that's pretty impressive. We invited the Siegel Music Company for an opera performance in the gym for our students. We also invited performers of contra dancing. And this is not a Nintendo reference or anything. It is a reference to 17th century country dances of English, French, and Scottish civilizations. I know we've all had our contra dancing memories back. But suffice to say, the students were treated to performances of fiddle musicians, piano, flute, guitar, mandolin, accordion, and brass. And my son indicated that dancing indeed did occur in 1st grade. So it was very good. No complaints there. So we appreciate that. And on the district side of the house, a lot of interesting and favorable things happening. One of the things that I know is near and dear to the board's heart is the proliferation of additional childcare options for families prior to the school age years. That has been certainly something that's been noted. So just to do a brief recap of where we are with that, last year, the town of North Elba founded the Child Care Committee, and that committee was led by the Comprehensive Development Plan. Retired teacher Dean Dietrich is the lead of that task force. I'm a member on that task force. And so the impetus at the end of the year last year was to generate a report to substantiate what many of us all had suspected, that there is a dearth of childcare opportunities in the greater North Elba area for families, and that something needs to be done. So that plan was created, and now our group has met once again, and we are heading off in November to a summit hosted by the Adirondack Foundation. There is a grant that they have aligned for communities that is designed to strengthen communities' safety nets. And so we're hopeful that our gathering team will be able to put forth an application that can secure funding for this initiative. All told, there's 3 phases of the grant disbursement, but it's were we to be successful, in the neighborhood of about $160,000 that would go towards the sustainability of a new childcare program in our community. So we have elected officials from the village of Lake Placid in the town of North Elba, the leaders of the comp plan, leaders from St. Ina School, and I'm the district's representative there. So I know that's something that we've all discussed, and I think we're making good progress in that direction. Another cool thing that's happening in our community, those of you who may recall last year, the town and county appointed Adam DeSantis as our economic development director. One of the things Adam talked to the board about at that time was the need to create a compendium of housing based on income levels for our community. Speaking about pilots and things like that, it's important that the middle income demographic has suitable housing in our community. But in addition to work beyond that, Adam recently completed a DRI grant. That's the Downtown Revitalization Initiative grant. Other communities in our area have successfully obtained those grants. Tupper Lake recently and Saranac Lake previously. And so the proposed grant is basically to revitalize the development corridor going all the way from the middle high school down towards Mill Hill, all the way to the rail trail, past Lisa G's. So the hope is that if that grant is successful, there are a number of green spaces that would be improved. There are a number of arts installations that would occur. And all of those things provide opportunities for our students to not only assist in the design phase, but also to obviously enjoy those things. But the goal from an economic development standpoint is to find ways to get people from the rail trail to Main Street. So if you can connect those things, that'd be beneficial. So I know there's several months before there's any response about the suitability of the application, but I think it's a cool development, and hopefully it lends some positive results. And most importantly, we are getting really close to the Halloween parade. I don't want to get too excited, but I will if I have to. So Halloween parade, token of our community, will take place on the day at noon on Main Street, supported by community schools, immediately followed by the dance sponsored by Roost and the Lake Placid Village Police Department at the Olympic Center. Always a good time to be had there.
Absolutely. I see that we strategically planned a Superintendent's Day for the next day.
I'm
So
particularly proud about
yeah,
that piece
yeah.
of art.
All the little goblins and witches will be coming in the next day, full of candy.
That's right. Yeah, that was a power move. for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
So that's my report. But if there's any questions, by all means.
Anybody have any other questions for Tim?
Well, then before you move on, I would just like to say that this week is board appreciation. So thank you all for your service to the district. I know the salary isn't what you expected, but the contribution is beyond what we could hope for. So thank you. And in commemoration of your service, we have gotten you some swag because
Wow.
why not? So
Parting gifts.
we have the swag bag and then some apple and cheese paraphernalia. Timely. All right. I believe this goes to Colleen S. Okay. Karen is keeping me
Yeah, thank you.
in line here. Don, that is for you. Absolutely.
You never knew you were going to get presents, did you, Don?
Right.
It's very heavy.
That bag will be gone before I get it.
Yeah.
I'm not getting any of that.
Karen is always very hard at work.
Karen
Behind the
is
scenes.
a weapon. We are blessed.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
There you go, sir.
Yes. Well, thank you all for your service to the board. We appreciate it. Karen, thanks for your hard work and
Of course.
securing the goodies for our board members.
You have a school store or an online store?
For proper swag,
Yeah, just to wear the colors.
let me see, I get you a link. Yeah, because that's something that has needed to propagate for some time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, we did.
I'm a move on. Take-
I know,
Yeah.
I know, it's definitely a subject of consideration. But our source of pride shouldn't end and stop at kidney drugs.
That's true.
Yeah, sure.
Fair enough.
I'll make a note, though, I'll get to you.
Goodness. Alrighty then, under information for the board, on my end, I don't really see anything.
And then we're moving on to our board self-assessment. Everyone can see that there's a compilation there that Karen has created that we can look at the overview. First of all, thank you to everybody for participating. I think it's really an important endeavor that we do each year just to gauge how we're doing as a board. I think if you look at the overall evaluation, there's nothing really that stands out that's very stark that we need to provide quick attention to. It's my understanding that if we're more than one category away from the majority, that we start to address it, but it seems that most of our information has fallen under effective or highly effective. The one area that I would like to bring up that seemed to hit a few times is just either board retreats or special workshops. And I know in the past, I don't think we've done it in a few years, but in the past we did do occasional retreats where a guest would come in. My personal opinion, at least the last one I attended, that it wasn't necessarily overly engaging. It was a PowerPoint presentation. And I certainly since COVID, since we've moved into opportunities where we could attend things virtually, that was definitely one of them that could have been a virtual retreat and probably saved quite a bit of money. So, but I think that there is an opportunity. November, December, and January, we only meet once a month. And Douglas Gerhardt has offered to possibly do a special workshop for us one of those evenings, at this time. And he would focus on kind of like the hot topics in the legal realm. I did attend a virtual law conference this summer. There was a lot of information in there that I think would be important for all of us to be apprised of. And he could hit on a few of those hot topics, and he's willing to come and do that. And that would kind of put us in the direction of, filling that blank maybe in our responses that most of us seem to have had in regard to retreats or, and I invite everyone here that I've been trying to attend some of the virtual ones. I can't often get away from the office. It's more costly to the district if we attend in person. There's one coming up next week. Another, it's the annual conference. It's being held in New York City, but there is a virtual component to it. And it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can go on and see which ones are of interest to you. But I would encourage that. Other than that, I'm just kind of opening this up. I think it's important that we look at maybe what our future goals might be or any areas that we might need to give more consideration to. But I'd like to just open it up to see what people's thoughts are.
Other than just the checklist here, did themes emerge in those little narratives? And if so, what would be the avenues to chase those down?
The ones that I mentioned, Don, the ones that spoke out to me mostly were the ones as I went through and looked at these individually. And if somebody else caught something else that I didn't, certainly speak up. But the ones that spoke out to me where it seemed that we were more in the category of developing were the ones on board retreats, that kind of category. I didn't see too much else that would have swayed one way or another. That's what I
In
saw.
the narrative section, the comment sections.
Yeah, those are the things that I saw. But if somebody else saw something different, please share. So if there's other areas there that you think that we should hone in on. I think we're really strong in, the categories of, student achievement, how we're monitoring the data now that comes in. It has changed a lot in the last year, I think, with the data coordinator and the information that we're getting. I do remember one comment from one of the members that was curious about how the NWEA scores were. And that did come up in one of the comments. I think that was a new scoring that we started last year. I did see that one, but if anybody else has anything they'd like to share or other things that you feel like we should improve upon, I think it's a great time to bring them up.
I certainly appreciate the protocols that the board follows. They're very intentional. Having worked in several school districts, I just think our board's very high functioning. From my perspective, incredibly easy to work with.
I think we're pretty, like you said, and I think, I do want to acknowledge, not only, I mean, Tim, you're kind of, you know, our guide through all of this, and you're just a really strong person to have there, as is Karen. And Karen just does so much behind the scenes that we don't even see. And I don't know that we would be as effective if we didn't have you two at the helm that kind of steer us. So thank you for that.
And your new 10-year contract right here.
Right.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. For sure.
Dana 15.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
I start shaking.
All right, if anybody, if there's nothing else?
May I just ask?
Yeah, sure.
Is everyone open to that notion of a working session with Douglas? I do always, he's a wealth of knowledge. So I'll gauge, you know, either December or January where he is more free, and since we only have one meeting that month, then we can, it won't overtax people's schedules to do that.
I think he mentioned January 7th or January 14th. I think our regular meeting is the 21st in January, and it might be better to wait until we get through the holiday season and wait until January, but I just think that would be a great way because
I agree.
there was a lot this summer. I remember I think I did a brief report to the board, but there was so much information that it almost needed an attorney sitting next to you to go back and review it. with
Other
you
than
again.
Ron.
Yeah, other than Ron, who's not here this evening, but it really, there was so much information that you almost felt like you needed someone that had that expertise next to you. So I think that would be wonderful if we could do that.
That would be virtual. I'll be virtual.
We'll pull you in wherever we
Okay.
are, wherever we decide to be. It may not be here in the border, it could be something else. All right, let's see. 6A was consent. Moving on to personnel. Recommended action, approve the items below, which are included in the personnel consent agenda. Item 7B, mentor appointments. 7C, winter coaches assignments. And 7D, CSEA employee sick leave time request. Any discussion on any of those?
Make the motion.
Motion, second? Second. Please vote.
Five yes.
Moving on to action items, A, B, C, D, and E are all under previous consent.
And if anybody wants to do the virtual conference, just let me know. I signed calling up. There's a nice agenda on there, so you can go look and see what there's about.
Second, good of the cause. Karen, do we have anything?
We do not.
Linking goals with agenda. I have the finance category with Dana's 3 reports. I have leadership perhaps with our board assessment, and students first and foremost with Tim's report. Anybody else have any others that they'd like to share? Not, we'll move into our adjournment phase. I would like to make a very quick personal announcement, which is very fun. So my daughter Kelsey, Nemick, who is the 6th grade teacher here, and her husband Jeff Nemick, who is the athletic director and dean of students, welcomed little baby girl, Eloise James, a week ago, and she is our newest little baby blue bomber. So we're very, very blessed, and she joins big brothers Cade and Jack. So we're really excited for them, and it's a good group to be a part of. So So on that happy note, our next meeting date, is, not until November 19th, right before Thanksgiving. And any old agenda topics? Any new ones? Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 5:55, please?
Moving right along.
And
Was
is there
that
a
Colleen
second?
Stefka?
I got you. I'll go 100%.
Great. You're there, Ryan.
Yeah.
Thank you. All in favor?
Right.